The central thing is to be true to one's core, to one's deepest desire. That might manifest as a desire for truth, surrendering to fate, finding or exploring one's higher self, developing and living ultimate compassion, following God's will, surrendering to the flow of the Tao. It might feel like many things. This is all about what you want. Any of these descriptions resonate, or they don't, and that is one manifestation of your deepest wants. Being true to one's desires might seem superficial or amoral. We can't just do what we want. That's the reason for the qualification of deepest desire. Some things seem superficially appealing, but with more examination and reflection, by seeing with more clarity, it becomes apparent that you don't actually want them. You're wanting to be a good person, a good partner or parent, rich, successful, or enlightened, are all bound up in this web of desires. Some are deeper than others, but nothing is excluded. Some of the specific items are hierarchical, so you might want to be successful at your job to be able to provide for your family and thereby be a good parent. In this instance, a good example of lacking clarity, of doing what you don't actually want, is neglecting the family for that very job, to the degree that you're undermining your original motivation. If you only work this job to make your family happy, making them unhappy by constantly being away might be a bad idea. Of course, you might want your job for other reasons, prestige for example, or because you actually think the trade-off between time and money is worth it after all. The point is that you can only know if look closely, if you have clarity. This kind of confusion of priorities happens all the time, in small and big ways. Lack of clarity leads to outcomes you would have prevented if you had known what you were doing, not in the sense of just having incomplete information, but in the sense of not paying attention to what is happening. Without paying attention, you push away parts of the experience and what you do know about it. The central arena of this push and pull of wants, the reason for lack of this clarity, and one of the biggest things you wouldn't like to happen intrinsically, is emotional pain. There is a bidirectional relationship between emotional pain and lack of clarity. One direction is obvious and well known. We don't see clearly, can't think straight, and do dumb stuff when we are emotionally hurt. Anger, grief, vindictiveness, and fear all distort our perception. We are repelled by a part of experience and flinch away, thus not seeing it clearly. The other direction is less obvious and has to be deeply contemplated, checked in one's own experience, understood, and integrated. Lack of clarity is the cause for emotional pain. Flinching away from the experience is what makes it uncomfortable in the first place. On the other hand, being utterly open to anything will take away the sting of it. One can see this with something that is just mildly uncomfortable, like being slightly anxious about something. The most likely immediate reaction is distraction, to get lost in an internal monologue, to distract oneself with fidgeting or social media, to do anything besides just being anxious. When one stops and actually looks at what is happening, feeling the anxiety in the body, reflecting what one is actually anxious about, what will happen is that first the anxiety will get worse. This is the reason that reaction works, it pushes some of the pain away. But when one comes out of one's shell completely, just sensing what is happening and getting over that initial hump of increased suffering, the experience isn't so bad anymore. It's important to keep at it and do it with something that is just very mildly pain-inducing, otherwise it is likely to stop before one has reached the peak of discomfort and discards the project. What I call the path, or the process of awakening or enlightenment, is the processing, accepting, and eventually being free from all the triggers of emotional pain. It is about increasing the clarity of mind, about enlightening one's experience, and as a result stopping to hurt oneself in all the small and big ways. I already pointed to how these two processes interact. How to actually go about this process would go beyond the purpose of this answer. The end point of this path is freedom from all psychological limitation, from all shoulds, all expectations, all judgments, all what-ifs, all rumination and all existential dread. This doesn't mean becoming a vegetable, even though one might think it does. It's still possible to compare options, make decisions, or mentally simulate scenarios. In the end it might look like any other life, but without internal pain. No suffering is needed to function, to live. This path is completely agnostic with regards to self, big self, non-self, awareness, universal consciousness, the void, grounds of being and everything else it is usually associated with. That is not because these have no relevance, as they do. Walking this path will most likely lead to experiencing a few, if not all, of these mystical states or modes. Yes, it might not feel like a state or mode, it might feel like the true reality underneath everything. I will call it a state of mind. The point is that the only mechanism by which you can appreciate any of them is the pain or absence of pain. And yes, that means I will also call feeling something to be fundamental to being, or irrefutably true, or the essence of everything, even a deep knowing of truth, an emotional reaction, most likely an absence of pain where there is usually pain. Let's take the example of boundless consciousness, a state where there are no boundaries in experience, everything is one, and that one is radiant luminous knowing, a pure cognizance that has no content. There is also no boundary between you and this field, so you are the field, you are the knowing quality of which the whole universe is made. This is an experience one can have, one can even learn to cultivate it to have access to it on demand. But why care? It might sound totally awesome, but what does that mean? The desire to attain such a state, or to get back to it, is motivated by the emotional reaction it brings. Experientially, the state of boundless consciousness is characterized by the absence of stuff, absence of boundaries, most specifically between you and everything else, but also the absence of almost everything else. So just the absence of all your usual pains already makes it very attractive and appealing, but even the feeling of having glimpsed the true nature of the universe, ignoring any actual ontological implications, brings a feeling of certainty, safety, invulnerability. Without these undoubtedly emotional reactions, there would be no appeal to this state at all. Indeed, it does become less interesting the less pain one is in, the more enlightened one becomes. What's the most important thing in spiritual enlightenment? Look at a house. What's the most important thing about building it? The roof? The windows, the number of bedrooms, the size of the great room? Certainly it would be the foundation. Many answers about enlightenment are about the windows and bedrooms. The foundation should be the first thing to build. The foundation is twofold. 1. Be honest. That doesn't mean be accurate, it means, do not deceive. And 2. Lose yourself in the service of others. The windows and roof, they are all good and to be searched for. But the results will be disappointing without these two foundations.